Alright, so we're basically going to be doing an adjusting entry problem. And let me go ahead and read the problem to you guys. On March 1st, Retro Inc. reported a balance in supplies of $200. During March, the company purchased supplies for $950 and consumed supplies of $800. If no adjusting entry is made for the following, and then they give us 4 different options to choose from. So the best way to go about this is let's go ahead and try to do the adjusting entry and see what accounts it impact. That way we can see if we hadn't done it, what the result would have been. So the adjusting entry would have been for the consumed supplies of 800, and that is basically a deferred expense since we paid for the supplies beforehand, and we deferred the expense until it occurred. And the way we would go about that is we would need to recognize the consumption of supplies, and then we would need to recognize the expense that's incurred. So one account that would be impacted is going to be our supplies account, which is a asset. And then the other account that's going to be impacted is supplies expense, which is a equity account, stockholders equity account. So to recognize 800 of consumption, well, let me go ahead and fill this out first. So we had a beginning balance of 200, and since it's an asset account, I know it's on the left side, my debit side, and then I purchased 950 worth of supplies. Okay, so the adjusting entry would have been a credit to my supplies for 800, and that's basically recognizing that I've used up $800 worth of supplies, and a debit to my expense account for 800, which recognizes that I've incurred an expense of 800 related to my supplies. And that basically it's my adjusting entry. Let me go ahead and highlight that or underline that in red. So this is basically the adjusting entry right here. A credit to supplies and a debit to expense. And let's just see what this is doing. So this is bringing down my assets by 800. And this is actually bringing up my expenses by 800. Now let's go through these options. So the first option, stockholders' equity will be overstated by 800. Well, let's see, do any of these accounts impact stockholders' equity? Well, yeah, supplies expense does impact stockholders' equity. And how does it impact stockholders' equity? Well, when we recognize any type of expense, our stockholder equity goes down. And this can be shown if we do stockholders' equity equals paid in capital plus retained earnings. Then basically retained earnings, it's net income minus dividend. It's supposed to be a D right there. And our net income is revenue minus expenses. So if we failed to recognize an expense, that's going to overstate our net income. And if our net income is overstated, our retained earning is overstated. And if our retained earning is overstated, our stockholders' equity is overstated. So option A makes sense. Our stockholders' equity would be overstated if we didn't recognize this expense. Now, expenses would be understated by 950. Well, expenses would be understated, but they would be understated by 800, not 950. Assets will be understated by 350? No. Assets technically would be overstated because we didn't credit the supplies account, and they would be overstated by $800. And then lastly, net income would be understated by 800. And net income would be overstated by 800, not understated. So this would be right if this was overstated instead of understated. So that's basically it. I hope that helped.